Welcome back, listeners, to BizBlend podcast. I am your host, Sana. Now, today we are exploring something that often feels, well, distant from the boardrooms and bottom lines. But maybe it shouldn't. What's that? Philosophy. Not the dusty old subject we think of from college classes, but philosophy as living guide for leadership, decision making, and resilience. In business, leaders often look for the newest tool, the latest trend, framework, or strategy. But just imagine, listeners, what if the wisdom we need has already been around for centuries? What if the concepts like Stoicism, virtue ethics, or even questions about meaning and purpose could shift how we run our organizations or manage people and face uncertainty? So, listeners, joining me is an incredible guest, Angelo D'Amico, President and CEO of Canada Rubber Group, INC. Angelo is a rare leader who blends economics, consulting, and philosophy with the realities of scaling a $25 million company. And he's here to talk about why timeless ideas still matter and how thinking philosophically can actually make us sharper, steadier, and more human leaders. So, listeners, let's quickly jump onto the discussion. And Angela, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really excited for this discussion.
Hi, Silent. Glad to talk to you today.
Super, super. So, Angela, let's try to understand how practical is meeting philosophical here. So, if you look at the status quo, most leaders they focus on frameworks and metrics and different approaches. But you argue that philosophy has a place in business leadership. How were you able to arrive at this conclusion? I mean, were there any observations or any experiences? How exactly does blending with business here?
Well, I wouldn't say that those frameworks have no value by any means, or that the traditional kind of KPIs approach and that sort of thing have no value. Certainly, in my own work and in the work I've helped with others, those things are still very relevant and useful. I guess what I would be an advocate for is that there just are some things you could add to that that would be more about the how we do things that can be helpful. So, to answer your question, how I kind of got into this, or what observations or experiences led me to this thought. Firstly, like you said, I hold a degree in economics. And when I was in university, I did study my share of philosophy along the way. And certainly I enjoyed taking philosophical courses on things like ethics. I was also kind of a young adult in the times of big names like Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. So listening to people like that, Stephen Fry, um, you know, it piques your interest and shows you that these topics belong in the mainstream as well. Um, After university, I was lucky to become a partner in an advisory firm, and so I spent just over 10 years with a number of different companies, and we would go and help them with all sorts of different challenges that they were, excuse me, having. And I got to really witness what a number of different leaders were doing, what they had in common, what they didn't. Today, I'm as you said, the president of a manufacturing firm. We have a team of 60 and customers globally. So in my career, I've been just uniquely fortunate. I've been able to have the privilege to work with a lot of different leaders in businesses and in communities, and I've been a part of countless candid conversations and boardroom meetings where important and sometimes difficult decisions were made by leaders. So I've spent a lot of time with people in leadership roles. I've been in leadership roles. I've had a lot of time to reflect on things that I think leaders ultimately want and the kind of things that can either help or hinder those efforts. And so I would say that what I'm here to talk about isn't just my opinion that I've come up with maybe from a book or something like that. And I'd hate for people to think that because the title's philosophy that that's what we're talking about. Really, what I'm left with here is a number of observations that have been made over a long period of time, having had this unique ability to sit in these boardrooms and be a part of these conversations, sometimes a fly on the wall, sometimes a participant in the decisions. Um, And that's really provided me a nice opportunity to say, you know, what do when it works, what does it have in common? When it doesn't work, what does it have in common? And so I think I can glean maybe a few things that seem to be almost always true about what good leaders want and how different philosophical concepts could contribute to them achieving that.
Hmm. I think that is more than sufficient to support this definitely, and um, of course, I really, really, really I'm inspired by the experiences that you have got and you have absorbed. So, with that, can you give us? I think it will make more and more clearer for our listeners as well. Can you give us a specific example of a time, Angelo, when a philosophical principle it directly helped you make a tough decision as a CEO?
Sure. So um, I'll say that for myself, we'll go back to 2020, an easy example. So when a lot of things shut down for a lot of businesses, mine included, we were all faced with a pretty abrupt stop to the regular business when the announcement of there being a pandemic was made. One of the things that we had to do was consider our bottom line, and um, so we had to make bottom line decisions that affected people. Now, obviously, our goal is to not harm people, to make sure we do the right by the people that we have, and this story is going to probably include a couple of different concepts. On one hand, um, we focused very much on only the things we could control and did not dwell on the things that we could not control. And that goes back. We'll discuss that in a little while, but a long-standing concept in philosophy about being able to focus on what you can control and not blame, not regret, not past what ifs, but just what decisions do you need to make now? What actions are in your power, and what kind of variables can you really take action on? So myself and my team were very focused on that. I think that clarity was really important. Also, um, because of that, we were able to kind of really pivot and turn our situation around really quickly. We were only really slow for about 3 weeks during that time, and then, we were a part of the effort in producing, protective equipment in our company. Um, but we did have that 3-week period where we were slower, and so where this takes the story is that, um because at the beginning of that, we didn't know how long it would take, rather than kind of cutting off certain people and saying, you know, "You're laid off, we don't need you right now," um, we everybody, including myself, worked 80% time for 80% pay, so we all hurt a little, but nobody hurt all the way. Nobody ceased to be able to pay their mortgage. Everybody was able to still put groceries on their table, but we really just didn't need people the same level, so we scaled down. We all scaled down and hurt a little bit together to protect there being any true job loss. However, by focusing on the things that were in our power, we were busy. Within 3 weeks, we were really busy again. Um, where that brings me to another philosophical point is that when those people came back to work, although I mean they hadn't missed out on any pay that they worked for, but nonetheless they had missed out on pay, and your mortgage doesn't go down or your groceries don't go down just because you didn't go into work on that fifth day every week. So when we got that business back those few weeks later, we topped everybody up and paid them that extra fifth day that they weren't at work because we wanted them to have the income. Not only that, we bonused everybody an extra um, bit of money to thank them for kind of being resilient with us and coming back in. So, 2 things there. So we focused on what we could control, and we really treated people not like the means to an end. We treated them like an end in themselves. So, just a couple of ways that you can kinda lean on old concepts, but they make a big difference.
Absolutely, absolutely, Angela. That is really, really thoughtful, really considerate, and because it's kind of flipping the script here against what we generally think about the pandemic that all the companies laying off. And as you mentioned about control, I'll bring in stoicism here, and also let's try to understand uncertainty. Now, of course, stoicism it teaches us about control and resilience. Um, Apart from especially the global pandemic scenario, like on a day-to-day basis in your daily practices, how have you applied these ideas when leading a company through any high stakes challenge or volatility, especially with the
So
current scenario? Mm.
yeah, okay. So on an everyday basis, so if we take all the crises out of the equation, um, how many of us can look at our businesses and we know those people who we'll go to when we have problems, where we lean on them for the solution because they're the experienced ones and they're the ones that can get us out of a jam. We rely on their expertise the most. And how many times can we say that in between those crises, we really don't give them the same attention and support, and maybe we don't ask them about what's going on in their lives or what it is that they're doing for hobbies, and we just don't get to know them and value them as people and family members and things like that. So I think that's one that's an everyday one. One that's not pandemic related, but it's still maybe to do with how to handle some volatility. Um, we at our company are really strong um, on relationships, and so that extends beyond our staff. But we really think that durable and ethical relationships are an important thing to have. And so to lead that, we reward integrity. So somebody who does the right thing in a negotiation process may or may not get the sale, but they've done the thing that was honest. They weren't dishonest, or they didn't negotiate in bad faith. And so we're recognizing things that are have integrity and properly rewarding the virtue. So that's driving culture. And we're really training, in a way, training our suppliers and our customers that sometimes when there's volatility and they might jump straight to mistreatment, maybe just bad habits, or maybe their company's culture, we approach with humility, but with strong boundaries, a mutual respect, and it's often something we need to teach them and teach them in a very kind and gentle way. But over the years, what we have found are that it's really become something that has been valued. It's given us strong precedent to negotiate, and it's made the relationships um, more transparent and more collaborative. So those are kind of everyday ways that we can do these things.
Totally. Oh, that's powerful. That's powerful. I think this also kind of clears the cloud in their, because listeners, they often would think that leaders, they don't struggle with those moments. But it's definitely because, we are all humans here. And Angela, you are really showing us that it's definitely about recovery and then reflection afterward. So that's powerful. And has there been any moment, I think it's kind of a different kind of question. Has there been any moment when you failed to practice this? Like, when a kind of you had to battle between your emotion or ego and then the philosophical principles that you would follow. And if yes, then what did you take away from that particular moment?
I think that at least small ways, as I reflect at the end of the day, I cannot think of a day where I don't fail numerous times in small ways, and so that might be um, answering a question defensively,
Okay.
or approaching somebody in a way that you've assumed that you kind of know all the variables, and then their response shows you that maybe you came in guns blazing a little bit too much. Um, I mean, by no means are we talking about going in and really being harsh, um, but not staying true to those things, letting the volatility of your inner become the volatility on the outside. I mean, that's a failure in and of itself. And so I would just say that on an average day, that's happening still for me many times. The standard is high, and it should be high because it's about small improvement. So I think for somebody listening, it isn't about trying to have that perfect day every day. You attempt it, but um, having enough room to let yourself make those mistakes and just reflect on it, as you said, is the most important thing. It's not about not having failure. Failure is going to happen every single day. And if you don't recognize it, it's probably not that it didn't happen. It's just you didn't really reflect on it honestly.
That's a very important lesson, especially for entrepreneurs, especially confidence. And while you were mentioning about how you um, apply the ideas of Stoicism, you mentioned about culture, values, integrity, and other values. So, virtue ethics emphasizes character and values. Um, How do you embed this into organizational culture when you're running a manufacturing company with nearly 60 employees? I mean, how do you trickle it down? Because it would be impossible to, uh, kind of get it trickled down to all of them. So, how do you do that?
Well, I think being an example of it firstly, but, I think if I'm breaking what you're asking into 2 separate maybe parts, one might be, um, about leaders wanting there to be ethics and the way that they treat people, and then maybe the other part's more about leaders want positive and driven cultures. So when we're talking about virtue ethics, maybe we'll talk about, virtue being formed by habit, so it's something Aristotle said. So, in practice, you're not gonna just kind of do something overnight. You're gonna have to practice it. It's gonna have to be intentional. I think a big part of what I think is valuable about all of this is, um, a lot of what you're gonna look for when you see a philosophical concept is not gonna be, "How do I emulate one thing or another?" It's gonna be, "What feels true to me? What can I use?" A lot of it's gonna sound a lot like common sense, but I think where the value is that when you find a concept that resonates and feels true to you and feels like a direction where you could go in a positive way as a leader, I think just holding the concept in your mind day to day, it reduces the variability in your consistency. It's very common that we do the right thing when we remember to, and but we often aren't thinking about it. And the problem with that is it doesn't take so many occasions of not doing the right thing to more than erode all the, social currency you've gained by doing the right thing sometimes. I think it's about consistency, and so holding these concepts every day just helps you to be more consistent and really gain that trust and be that example that builds a better culture. So where people feel safe so they can take small risks before big risks need to have to be taken, where a little bit of failure is okay because we need to be creative and innovative, and we need to respect people's, the human side of the organization, which isn't just about, punching numbers. It's also about thinking and trying and being creative. I think we should be rewarding integrity, like I mentioned earlier. And I think maybe, valuing people's time, uh, consistent moderation is better than burning people out. Bureaucracy is not good for, letting people focus on the important things. So those are all just kind of micro examples. I would not suggest that somebody go to one branch of philosophy, like, for example, Stoicism, and just say, I like what the Stoics have to say. I'm going to be just like them. I think you're adopting the strengths and weaknesses of old thinking, and it's maybe better than nothing, but it's probably not the best thing you can do. You already have strengths and weaknesses, so you don't need to adopt somebody else's strengths and weaknesses. I think it's about cherry picking the wisdom. And, for example, Stoicism, I think it's really nice for its resilience. I think it's not so good because it lacks the optimism and the vision that you need in a business. I think that Stoics were about how do we endure this hard life? Life will be hard. How do we get through that? How do we not let those hardships crack us? I think that in businesses we need to dream a little more than that, and I think in the modern world we think a little bit more optimistically than that, and we have the great living environments where we can be that way. And so if we shouldn't just emulate old thinking without really some deep thought about how it applies to you.
Exactly. I think that's a very important, very crucial, kind of a, I should say, a stop sign or a pause sign in there that uh, we need not, completely take everything from a particular branch of philosophy because we need to understand that how much relevant it is in the modern context. So I think that is something that I think it should be an important highlight from this takeaway when it comes to blending philosophy with business. I want to bring another aspect here, um, because you are in a manufacturing sector here. Technology, it's right now it's moving at an unimaginable pace, like faster than ever, Angelo. We have digital platforms, SaaS, automation, AI. And yet, philosophy it asks us to slow down and question meaning, ethics, purpose. How do you see this relationship between technology and philosophy shaping the way leaders make decisions today?
I think that Technology is in service to our endeavors, and I think that us selecting the compass about our endeavors is more a philosophical question. That doesn't mean you can't use technologies to support your decision making, but ultimately, um, it's unlikely you're gonna find the answers to the alignment of your values, strictly from technology without you inputting those things in the first place. So, I have no problem with technology. If we're talking specifically about things like artificial intelligence, then I think, uh, it's fine in service too. I think the most important thing is first we know our guiding, values. We know the things that align us maybe as a company and when we're not talking about things like AI, we're just talking about other technologies that are improving, then I think they take an extreme administrative burden off of people. And like I said a moment ago, I really value the ability to take a creative person, and take the chains of administration off of them a little bit. I really value that because I think people will enjoy their workplace more, believe in the endeavor more, and participate more consistently when they get to be creative and they get a little bit of autonomy that way, autonomy to come in and think, where you really value the unique human abilities that they have. And so for me, technology is an opportunity for that. The risk is that if we go down a path as companies, I don't mean as society, but I mean we all have our own decisions to make in companies and as people. I think the risk is if we try to use this in place of the human side, that's the risk. So if we're trying to automate all customer experiences, I think that can become cold in some cases. I think if we're trying to automate everything about our processes, we just have to be careful. Where's the value add and where's the administrative part? And a good question for me is, are we using this technology to respect people? And if we're using it in a way that takes things off their back that are mundane and administrative and not valuing their creative skills, then I think it's actually a really great opportunity.
Of course, absolutely. And before we wrap up, Angela, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, what would be the easiest way?
They can connect with me, www.angelodamicocanada.com, and they can email me from there if they'd like to. If they'd like to reach out or see more content, that's where they can find it. And if I could just maybe challenge the people who are watching this. We've talked a little bit about, my own thoughts about how leaderships want to build durable, ethical relationships, how they want to build positive and driven cultures, how they care to have shared success in the long term. They got to focus on what really matters and what's going to help the organization and where it's going, and what's going to help them perform at a high level as a leader to achieve those things and not hinder that. Um, I would say to people listening, pick one. Don't try to boil the ocean on this. Don't try overnight to think, "Oh, I got to go read all these books or I have to go become very well versed in all of these things." That's not. I don't think that. I would find that very intimidating. I um, think about what you think makes you a strong leader in the first place. What's a concept that you use really well that you think makes gives you your strength? And then maybe go in something like an AI, a language model, and find out what kind of philosophy has spoken about that thing. And then maybe what you'll find is there's somebody who thinks like you, who's done it before, and who's done it in a really clear way, and whose insights might help you be you even more consistently and with even more power. So I think it's more about how can you use it to support who you are, not abandoning you in place of some philosophy. So that would be the takeaway, I think.
Yeah, that's a good one, Angela. That's a really good one. And do you also believe that this is a privilege? Like, many entrepreneurs, they would say that I barely have time to breathe, or I don't have the time to even think about it. Do you think that, this idea of philosophical leadership, it only applies once a company has already made it?
I think it applies to people, and so those people sometimes are in leadership roles. For me, when I started doing the advisory that I was doing, there were only 2 of us, and the companies we helped, um, could have small teams, maybe 10 people, and they could have large teams in the hundreds or in the thousands. So these are things that my role was not to go there and convince them about philosophy, but what I saw was that when they were successful, the ones that cared to do that discipline of leadership well, cared about these things and applied these kind of concepts. They drew deeper meaning into their
Mm.
companies, even sometimes unknowingly. But I'm just trying to codify it so it can become something that's actionable for people. But no, at all different sizes of companies, or even just for individuals who have an interest in how to think more powerfully for themselves, how to be a little bit, more in command of, people are anxious. They want to focus on what they can control instead of what they can't. It's as simple as that. So if you're somebody who's a solopreneur, I think a lot of businesses, the high percentage of businesses are one, two, three people. A lot of them are even home businesses. Um, Helping you answer the question about why you're doing what you do, how does it align with you, and when does a certain direction fit with what you believe will help you make decisions anyway, so that as you get busier, you're getting busier in a way you believe in and not just going down a rabbit hole of, exhaustion and burnout.
Mm. I think that's encouraging. That's really encouraging because um I what I can take away is that, you are reminding that philosophy isn't about how much time I have as an entrepreneur. It's about how I choose to think in the time that I already am using or I have. So it's more towards the execution, the practical part.
Yeah, and we're not aiming to become philosophical historians, right? Like, we're not looking to spend hours and hours studying this like a student of history so that we learn the history of philosophy. I'm not an advocate for that, in this moment. That's not what I'm talking about. Um, what I'm talking about is becoming your own philosopher based on, being more philosophical based on, inspiration you can take from people who have thought like you very clearly in the past. So it's a much less heavyweight endeavor, but with a high impact nonetheless.
I agree. I agree. Lovely, lovely. So, listeners, what I'll do for all of you is I'll have all the details in the show notes. So, just refer to them along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And what I can take away from this entire discussion today is leadership isn't not only about Excel sheets or reports, graphs or analysis or strategies. It is about how we think, what we value, and the principles we bring into the room every day. And philosophy, if I can bring in here, it doesn't give us easy answers, but it does give us better questions, listeners. And maybe that's what great leadership is really about. So, Angela, thank you so much. You really, really brought wisdom with some practical, executionable, actionables in there and real world grounding. Thank you. This was really, really much needed.
Thanks, Anna.
So, listeners, if today's episode sparked reflection, I encourage you to pause after this and maybe ask yourself, what philosophy am I unconsciously leading by? And is it the one actually I want guiding me? With that, until next time, keep blending thought with action, business with humanity. This is BizBlend, and I'm your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.